Hi everyone, in this video on anger, I'm going to talk a lot more about blame because blame is a feature and a major feature of anger and something that we can all relate to doing at one point or another, I'm sure. Whether that's blaming a person or blaming a situation or even blaming ourselves. And so blame is something that I would say is pure distraction. As I've presented in previous videos, anger is a secondary condition. In other words, the primary condition is that we feel hurt and sad. And in order to deal with that, even though it's a false form of dealing with it, we can sometimes use anger, and that anger hardens us. And in that hardening, it takes the edge off the sadness that we're feeling. And so one of the best ways of avoiding dealing with our hurts is to blame another, to blame a situation, because what it does is it puts our attention out there, and which is the very opposite of what we ought to be doing, which is coming further in and reflecting on why we are upset or why we're feeling hurt in the first place. But when we blame someone for something that they did or something like that, the purpose of blame is just to bring our focus and attention out there in order to avoid what we actually need to deal with ourselves. And that's where, we can get arguments and fights in a relationship, and things can escalate even out of control sometimes because both are blaming each other for what the other one is doing or not doing or something like that. And so, it doesn't go anywhere, and basically it's all just pure avoidance to actually going a little bit deeper and dealing with what is actually underlying what that person did or didn't do. In other words, it's our own disturbance with the situation. Okay, so if you catch yourself blaming someone or blaming a situation, even blaming yourself, the first thing to do is to recognize that you're blaming. And that whatever you're doing when it comes to blaming is not going to get you anywhere. In fact, it's going to bury you even deeper, and it's not going to resolve truly the situation that you're finding yourself in. And so the first thing is to recognize that you've gone into distraction, or that you are avoiding dealing with something. And I can assure you that that something that you're avoiding will be a hurt, it'll be sadness. They're words to describe the same thing effectively, but essentially that's what you want to come back to. The question is, okay, what am I hurt about? What's really going on for me? And you make the situation much more about yourself and what's going on for you in terms of how you're feeling in your body and the hurt that you're feeling, as opposed to what the other person is doing or not doing. And so it's about nominating how you're feeling in yourself without referencing the other person. So it's not like, I feel this way because they did that, or I'm feeling this way because they're doing that. It doesn't work like that, because it's not truly about the other person, and that's what debases blame. If you can come to a point where you can see that it's actually nothing to do with the other person, that in fact it's a choice that we're making in reaction to what's happening, then that is the saving grace, so to speak. Otherwise, the only alternative is to see, or perceive, I should say, that the other person is the one that is responsible for how you're feeling. And that to me is so disempowering. And that's why we've got to understand the mechanics of anger, because if we get locked into that way of thinking, that will just encase you in hurt for the rest of your life. And sometimes I've spoken to people that, for many, many, many years later, they're still blaming a person, or they're even blaming themselves for an incident that happened many years ago, and they haven't been able to come out of that. And therefore the hurt hasn't been resolved. And yet they can talk about what happened and the situation, pretty much until the cows come home, if I use that term. But essentially, it doesn't work. And ultimately, it's truly imprisoning for us to have that way of belief that says, no, they did that, and therefore they're responsible, or that's the reason why I'm feeling the way I am today. Whereas if we take responsibility for what we need to work on, then we have truly a way of dealing with the other person or the situation, if whatever they're doing is not okay, whether it's abusive or something like that. So in nothing of what I'm talking about today am I saying that it's excusable abuse from someone else, or if somebody else does something that truly isn't harmonious or isn't okay, or they impose on you. I'm not saying it's about just tolerating that and just, being okay with that. Absolutely not am I saying that. What I'm saying is that there is a way to deal with the situation such that you can respond to it and it doesn't have to own you. In other words, you don't have to think that the only way to deal with the situation is to get angry, perhaps because you feel your voice might not be heard if you don't. It's possible to learn how to truly communicate clearly and take appropriate actions and steps to deal with the situation, but also take full responsibility for your own hurts in the process. Otherwise, what ends up happening is that one person fires, you fire back, they just make a bigger weapon, you make another bigger weapon, and before we know it, we've got nuclear weapons. Now that might sound a bit outlandish, but essentially that's how it happens. Over time, not dealing with things and blaming the other side eventually leads to bigger and bigger scenarios and situations, and even countries that don't like each other and are prepared to go to war together. So if we can tackle blame on a personal level, then we would never have it on a macro level. So let's work together, let's talk about blame more in an honest fashion so that we can knock it out as best as we can, so that we can actually learn how to deal with situations that otherwise get the better of us.